Hello again. You're watching Talk to Al Jazeera with Philippine President Gloria Arroyo. I'm Veronica Pedroza. On the international scene, Arroyo has been buoyed by the successful conclusion of ASEAN and ASEAN Plus 6, or the East Asia Summit. That last grouping includes China, India, Japan, South Korea, Australia and New Zealand. Those nations put together make up more than 3 billion people, and they're working towards a free trade area by 2015. ASEAN is now working towards a charter to be signed later this year that would transform a group known for operating by consensus and staying out of each other's affairs into a rules-based organisation along the lines of the European Union. It would mean punishing member states that violate the rules, and that could prove troublesome for the grouping. Sitting in the ASEAN chairmanship this year gives Manila some real influence on trade and legal issues facing the region and beyond. But its critics say ASEAN is not relevant to the hundreds of millions of people it represents. So I asked Mrs. Arroyo what her priorities are in the region.
Well, let me first say, Veronica, that the ASEAN and East Asia summits were an enormous success. And it reflects well on ASEAN, our region, and our extended partners like China, Japan, and Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and India. And I'm very happy that at a time of so much uncertainty in the world, ASEAN took a bold step forward rather than a timid step backward with our declaration on the ASEAN Charter. And the fact that ASEAN brought together so many leaders and nations in the world to talk about peace and security, social development, and economic cooperation is really testament to the fact that people and leaders want to have greater collaboration among nations.
ASEAN Plus 6 does indeed represent more than 3 billion people in the world.
Yes.
At least 500 million of those earn less than $1 a day.
Yes.
How can ASEAN Plus 6 be relevant to them?
Well, we made great, we really made great progress in talking about very important and relevant issues. For instance, migration. And then also energy independence, security, social justice, human rights, economic cooperation. And all of these are very important to the poor. Migration, for instance, who are the ones who migrate? They are the lower, many of those who migrate are the poor. And in this agreement on migration, we all agree that, that we will be together protecting the rights of our migrant workers wherever they may be, whether they are going to migrate to another ASEAN country or whether they're going to migrate to another country like the Middle East, for instance. So that's one way. And then our social programs on education, small enterprise. In fact, that was the reason why in this summit, as chair of ASEAN for this year, the Philippines chose the theme, One Caring and Sharing Community. Because we want to advance a sense of community and we want to look after each other in terms of social justice, in terms of economic cooperation, in terms of development, in terms also of common security. Because the poor suffer the most when there is a lack of peace and order, when there is terrorism in the land.
What about a nation like Myanmar, which ASEAN has been having problems with?
Well, we all are united in our view that Myanmar must end its authoritarian ways as soon as possible and free Aung San Suu Kyi.
I also want to ask about your interest in restarting the Doha round. I understand this is something that you are personally quite involved and keen on, but there are many parties around the world who are worried that developing nations are getting a raw deal.
That is the other important thing about ASEAN, that you know, I mean, as host, I was very honored to host ASEAN at a time of such, when there are so many important events that we have to address in the world. And at the time that the Doha round is faltering, ASEAN stood up to be counted in its commitment to keeping the doors of global trade open and opening it some more. Also, at a time when there is concern about nuclear proliferation, we were united in our commitment to the UN Security Council resolution. So these are important things, but most important, or not most important, but finally, also ASEAN is committed to expanding its trade area to one of the world's great trading blocs. So all of this show that ASEAN is relevant and the future of ASEAN indeed is good.
How can you, as ASEAN chair, though, make sure that these trade agreements help rather than hinder the people who are already poor?
Well, the important thing is that together, that's why we must promote social justice, because we cannot just promote economic cooperation without taking care of those who might fall by the wayside. And that is the reason why we all help one another too, to promote social justice in our countries. And as I said, one of the concrete results of the last ASEAN Summit is our declaration on how we're going to protect our migrant workers.
So you're convinced that free trade is the way to development?
Open trade is much better than protectionism for development. But that's like saying that capitalism is better than a dictatorship. But having said that, there are the pitfalls, there are the shortcomings, and then in one caring and sharing community, that must be addressed as well. And we must provide the safety nets in terms of greater education, more protection for the environment, better health services, more opportunities to create jobs. And those are the things that ASEAN, the member nations of ASEAN, will help one another with.
More generally, I just want to ask you, you seem to be in quite a reflective, big picture type of an attitude towards your job, towards the challenges that are facing you at the moment.
That's how it must be. We can't be micromanaging.
So, ma'am, where do you think democracy is here in the Philippines? It's been 20 years now since the fall of Marcos. In Thailand, recently, we've seen a coup attempt that came really out of the blue. You have faced many rumors of a military coup. Are you worried that the Philippines might fall into this apparently typical Southeast Asian cycle of coup elections? What are your views about where this nation of more than 80 million people is?
I would say that the Philippines is probably the most democratic nation in the region. And I myself am a person that upholds the democratic principles. That's why I was saying that I deplore the killings, whether they be done by the left or the right, especially political activists and journalists. But let me say also that I have personally brought the peace process in Mindanao to a new level. And that is, as I said, focused on interfaith dialogue, social awareness, intercultural awareness, infrastructure and economic development, and mutual security. And peace there in Mindanao is very much a human rights issue, as is poverty alleviation, which is my #1 issue.
So you don't think there is any threat, despite those rumors that keep coming back, of a military takeover in the Philippines?
Well, as you have seen, any attempt has been pushed back by the military themselves. So I'm very confident of the professionalism of the military and the police, especially now that we are accelerating the structural reforms.
Madam President, thank you very much indeed. You've given us a very full and detailed interview, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
The year ahead promises greater challenges for Mrs. Arroyo and her government, issues that she will have to face head-on in order to survive in office. I'm Veronica Pedrosa. Thank you for joining us.